The King of Fighters. Select member.
Okay, 行くぜ。
Well, look who finally decided to canonically show himself. Son of Geese, adopted son of Terry, and the kid that's 1,000 times more popular than the game he actually comes from. Rest well, old friend. May you live on in the great fightcade beyond. Yes, it is time to talk about the first DLC for the King of Fighters 15, Team Garo. And I really can't start with anyone other than Rock. If you're not familiar with the guy, he's quite literally what you'd get if you smashed Geese and Terry together and then sprinkled on some anime protagonist. That comes with some boons and disadvantages carried over from each side of the family. With the good first, Rock certainly learned how to deal out the damage like his dad's. It's not quite as high as Terry, and the combos are slightly more complex, but this is still a character that can rip off massive chunks of health without having to spend much meter. Having moves from two characters like Geese and Terry also means that you end up with a very well-rounded character with the capability to go high, low, switch sides, or even grapple people in a blink, testing the reactions of his opponents. Last positive is something new for Rock. SNK has given this boy an install super. I'll go over it more as we go through his moveset, but having a buff that lasts the rest of the round after landing a climax sounds pretty sweet, no? Now for the negatives, there are two big ones. First is that Rock is going to get outpoked mid-range by a lot of characters on the roster. You're going to have to get a bit closer with Rock than most characters, leaving him open to counters. And speaking of counters, I really hope you land whatever you throw at your opponent, because if they pass that defensive or reactions-based test, it is going to be lights out for Little Rock, as many of his moves have either lengthy startup, big recovery time, or are very unsafe if blocked. Dude can go at either anchor or mid, but I'm leaning a bit towards mid as his more versatile offense can do without bars. But there's also the looming destructive potential if you cash them in with Rock. Rock's normals are standard for the most part, but like I said earlier, they're pretty short. So Rock is going to have a tougher time getting things started against any opponents with solid pokes. To compensate for the lack of range though, every far normal other than heavy kick is special cancelable. One last thing is that his crouching heavy kick is whiff cancelable. Nothing all that notable about his command normals either. Elbow spike, done with forward and light punch, is just straight up combo filler or a slow starter. No extra bells or whistles here. Same goes for parabola kick, forward and light kick. This is another one of those overhead moves that stops being an overhead if it cancels a normal, but in this case I wouldn't recommend trying to use this in combos. If you proceed it with a light, the move is so slow that Rock can get countered before it hits. And if you do a heavy before the command normal, the combination of pushback and slow attack speed means he just whiffs. Rock's specials start with a gift from the Howard side of things, Reppuken. Quarter circle forward and punch. This is a ground-based projectile that moves slowly if you use the light version and faster with the heavy version. The EX version is the famous double Reppuken. But despite the name, Rock doesn't actually throw out two Reppukens. Instead, the first projectile stays in front of him before he tosses out the second. This first one can eat up any non-super projectiles, making it one of the better projectile counters in the game, or you can just use it as a nice combo ender. Oh, and speaking of combos, topping one off with light Reppuken isn't a bad idea at all, as it leaves Rock plus on hit and block. Good move for keeping the pressure up. Next up is Hard Edge, quarter circle back and punch. This move has great horizontal range and will either be your primary combo ender or combo filler depending on the version. The endings or super setups are the light version, which causes a soft knockdown, and the heavy version that does more damage and causes a hard knockdown. The filler is the EX version, which does slightly less damage than the heavy version, but as a big time upgrade, it causes a crumple, leaving the opponent primed for big damage. Every version of this move is unsafe if blocked, with the exception of a light version that hits at the very end of the animation. Resist the urge to use this as an approaching tool. The anti-air option for Rock is the ever-ridiculous Rising Tackle, Z-motion forward and punch. Rock's version of this move works like the opposite of Terry's, in that the light version is the one with invincibility, while the heavy version has none to speak of. EX version has invincibility too and does the most damage. But even with all that invincibility, you'll still probably find the most value in the heavy version, and that's because it possesses one key trait that the others don't. You can hit the brakes on this move. This is a trait you'll find on quite a few Fatal Fury characters. If you press Light Punch and Light Kick at the same time right as this move connects, Rock will reset to his neutral position while the opponent gets knocked into the air for a juggle. Let me tell you now, if you use Heavy Rising Tackle in a combo, there is zero reason not to break. A Heavy Rising Tackle break into Hard Edge not only does more damage, but it can then be super cancelled. And if the move is blocked, well, it's still unsafe, but it's way less unsafe than a blocked Rising Tackle. If you want to go overhead, there's the aptly named Overhead Kick, Z-motion forward and kick. Any of you Garo players out there might recognize this as his top attack, and any of you that used this move once will recognize that this is a liar. Overhead kick? More like, why would you lie to me? I trusted you. Okay, there actually is one version of this move that's an overhead, but look at that startup. I understand having an off-speed overhead for both balancing and offensive purposes, but that's a bit much. The light version is not an overhead, nor can it be used in combos, but it can be used to counter lows and projectiles. The EX version does slightly less damage than the heavy, but it can be used in combos and causes a floor bounce. This is the version of the move you're most likely going to use, as it's great combo filler. It can also be used as a possible ender to Rage Run, quarter circle back and kick. This is Rock's most intriguing move, as it puts him into a dash that has 5 possible follow-ups, and 3 of them change if the Rage Run version was EX. The first ender is a simple stop by pressing Light Punch. It's not an instant stop, so you can still get Rock smacked while doing this, but it's still fine for baiting out whiffs from opponents trying to catch him during the Rage Run. Light Kick will give you Dunk. This is the much better overhead move in my opinion. If you're in the middle of applying pressure and want to switch things up to an overhead, then this is the choice I'd recommend. But do use with caution, it's very unsafe if blocked, and this is one of the moves that gets affected if Rage Run preceding it was EX. This makes the move do more damage and gives it a soft knockdown property. The Heavy Punch version gives you a variation of Hard Edge that does the same damage as the light version, but an EX Rage Run preceding it will give this attack more damage than the Heavy Hard Edge. This is the fastest of the enders, but just as dangerous if your opponent sees it coming. Heavy Kick will give you an interesting movement option in Shift. This move only works if Rock is close enough to the opponent, but if he is, then he immediately switches over to the other side of the opponent. Now, he can't instantly move after the switch, hell, he can even get hit here, but it's still fast enough to catch people off guard, and there is one special that can cancel it. The last ender is Overhead Kick, which in this case is done with a simple forward and kick. This doesn't change the move in any way, so I find it odd that it's an ender for Rage Run. You can already run and then do this move normally. Maybe it's for those that struggle with Z-motions? I don't know. The next special is another you can add on to the pile of risky moves. It's Crack Counter, quarter circle forward and kick. Does not work against projectiles, and this is no frame 1 counter. Rock can get hit if he's too late or too early with this move. But if you can get the timing just right, the opponent's attack will get stopped dead and they're eating a hard knockdown. Light version blocks high and mid attacks, while the heavy version is for repelling lows. EX version does a bit more, as this version ends up knocking the opponent into the air, allowing for follow-up attacks. The final special to go over is Rock's Command Grab, Shinku Nage. half circle back, then forward plus punch. Unlike a number of command grabs in the game, this one cannot be used as a combo ender, but it's still a command grab, so it's good for catching blocking opponents. Light and heavy versions have no differences, while the EX version ends in a wall bounce that can start combos. The light and heavy versions can have the brakes put on right after the opponent goes airborne. However, in this case the damage doesn't actually occur until the opponent hits the ground, and a Shinku Nage break does less damage if you just let the opponent drop. So only do the break on this if you 100% have a combo in mind that does more damage than the grab. Also, this is the special I was referring to earlier that can cancel Rage Run Shift after the side swap. Rock's got 2 super moves, one for defense and one for offense. Starting with a defensive one, we have Raging Storm, double quarter circle forward and punch. This move has a generous amount of invulnerability on startup and has massive vertical range that can catch opponents trying to jump in. The EX version can also be held, which I'm convinced is only so because it allows you to look at Rock's dumb face. The other super is Shining Knuckle, double quarter circle forward and kick. Does less damage than Raging Storm, but with its superior horizontal reach, this will be the super that gets more usage as a combo ender. Normally I'd call it there and we move on to the game plan segment, but for the first time we need to go over the climax super, because SNK gave their baby boy something special. 2 climax supers. One works as expected, so that leaves me to talk about Deadly Rave EXT. Quarter circle forward then half circle back plus both heavies. This climax does slightly less damage than the other one, but it leaves Rock with a buff that lasts the entire round and changes the following. Reppuken does more damage, Heavy Hard Edge gets a 3rd hit that gives the move absurd damage for a special, Rage Run Dunk hits twice and does the same damage as its EX version, Shinku Nage does more damage than its EX version but has no wall bounce, Raging Storm does more damage and both climaxes do more damage. What the hell? Outside of the extra smidge of damage possibly ending a match, I can't think of any reason why you'd use the other climax move with Rock. You've got a lot of tools to play with when you're using Rock Howard, and all work towards the same goal: opening the opponent up. Use Reppuken to first dismiss any zoning possibilities, then if you get close, use an ever-changing blend of quick low normals, Rage Run Dunk, Rage Run Shift, Overhead Kick, and Shinku Nage to keep the opponent guessing defensively. If you can force out a major error, then you can use EX Hard Edge and EX Overhead Kick to deal some big time combos. And if you find yourself stuck in the corner, don't forget that a well-timed Rising Tackle or Crack Counter can immediately get Rock out of the jam. If you're facing Rock, then keep those quick normals cocked and loaded. You are going to play a guessing game if Rock gets close, so keep him at bay with constant pokes until he tries a haphazard approach that can be seriously punished. But if he does get in, not all is lost. With how much startup and recovery his specials have, it's very possible to either beat him to the punch or find that punishable move. Get Rock backed up instead and look out for a Crack Counter or Rising Tackle. If either is mistimed, you can then unload on him.
Stop now!
That should get you started with Rock Howard. As always, if you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe to this channel, like the video, and please leave a comment below. See you guys next time with the next member of Team Garo.
What a stellar fight! These two know how to rumble! Winner! 暗黒の血がどれだけ体を苛もうが、俺は宿命に抗ってみせる。